o'clock, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Silver Falls School Board to order, and please note attendance, Denise. We're in a work session tonight. We'll move right into our discussion items. First one, the Schlater Project. Loan funding, Sharon Capizzo, Columbia State Bank. Just please come up here and...
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I guess I'll just start, maybe just give you a little bit of background on myself. Would that be helpful?
That'd be great.
I've been in banking for about 31, 32 years now. Most of that time was 25 years spent at Bank of America. And of that 25, I probably spent 22 of it covering local and state governments throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington. I ran the government banking group for Bank of America. And about 2 years ago, I left there and came over to Columbia Bank to do the same thing for them. And Columbia Bank is a community-based bank, and one of the things that they were really looking to do was to do projects like this for local communities. And they brought me on about 2 years ago to do that for them. So that's how I got here.
Good.
Does anybody have any questions on the background? No? Okay, well, we'll get right into the agenda item. We all have a copy of this in your packets?
Yes, we do.
Okay. What Columbia Bank is offering here is to fund some capital improvements for the school district. This is going to be a full faith and credit, not subject to appropriation, annual appropriation. And what that means is that, if these payments on the loan, once it's made, the only thing that happens as far as approval for this loan is once the board approves it, it's approved, and then the monthly, quarterly, or however we set up the payments are not subject to appropriation from that point forward. Does that make sense? Okay. The total amount of the loan is $2,550,000. It's a 13-year fully amortizing fixed rate loan. And I think you have a copy of the amortization schedule along with the proposal, so you can see what the payments are going to look like. We're going to single advance this at closing, which means all the funds will be advanced on the closing day of the loan. So once the documents are signed, you'll have the money to start your capital projects. Payments are going to be semi-annual principal and interest payments. They'll be payable on July 15th and January 15th, commencing January 15th, 2016. So even though we're closing this, I think you're planning on closing it in June, July, somewhere around there, your first payment will not be due until 2016. Okay. This is a tax-exempt, bank-qualified, fixed-rate facility. It is actually based on an actual 360-year base. The fixed rate will be 2.68%. Fees for the facility, and these fees I'm giving you are just the fees that are for the bank. So if you have any bond counsel fees outside of this, those are not included in here. Okay. The bank's fees are $1,500 loan fee, one time, and then a $2,500 fee for our legal counsel to review the documents. Again, like I said, it's a full faith and credit of the district. Is being pledged for the bonds. Also, we're taking a pledge of the proceeds of the loan until such time as those proceeds have been spent. So that means once the facility is advanced, the funds go into your account, and as you spend them down, once they're gone, then they're not subject to the pledge anymore. We're not taking any collateral, so there's no collateral. It's just strictly a full faith and credit. And we are also asking for a debt service reserve fund, and we'll get into that a little bit more into the proposal, but you'll see on here that there's also a pledge of that debt service reserve fund. So it'll be 1 year an annual debt reserve fund. So once the funds go in there, we also have a pledge on that until such time as they're used to make a payment. Let's see, warranties and representations are usual and customary for transactions of this type. There aren't really a lot of covenants on it. The only covenant that's going to be on this is to establish the annual debt reserve and then an annual 1.25 time debt service coverage. And if you can read here and see what the definition of that is. It's pretty simple, and what we do is we just take the net income, that's the change in the net assets, plus depreciation and amortization, plus interest expense, plus unrestricted cash, plus the debt reserve fund. So we give you credit for those dollars that are sitting in the reserve fund. And then that gets divided by current maturities of long-term debt, principal, and interest. And right now you're fine. You have plenty of room in that calculation. And here's where it talks about the debt reserve fund is reserved for 1 year, and that's 1 year's principal and interest. Goes into this fund, and it sits there until the payments are due. Events of default, very normal stuff. If the school district were to default, there's a 5% increase in the interest rate at that time. The only default there is if the facility becomes non-tax exempt, which there's no reason why it should become taxable, and if there's no payments made on the facility. So those are really the only two things that could happen that would make it go into default. Annual reporting on it, CPA prepared financial statements. This is very customary, 270 days after fiscal year end. Gives you plenty of time to get them done, get them approved, and then get the bank a copy of them. Same thing with your annual budget. Once it's approved, we need a copy of it, but not longer than 90 days after your fiscal year end, which I think that's plenty of time to get the budget done and present it. The other report that we're looking for is student annual enrollment report annually. So we can just kind of see, how many students are enrolling, how you're growing, and or are the students actually enrollment going down. And really that's it as far as financial reporting goes. From time to time we might ask for something else, but I can't think at this point what that might be. This particular term sheet actually expires on May 15th. And so if for some reason the facility isn't going to be closed by that date, then all we need to do is just have a discussion. We need to kind of figure out when the facility is going to be closed, and then I just need to take a look at the market rates, and then we'll take it out longer again. And that's kind of it on the term sheet. You can sort of take a look at the amortization schedule, see what the payment sizes are going to look like. These include both interest and principal. And again, you can see the dates. January and July of each year is when the payments are going to be due, and the first one is due January 15, 2016. I think that's the end, in case anybody has any questions on the term sheet or anything
Just
else.
curious, why are you looking for the student data when you've already given us the loan, and independent of what the student population does, we still need to pay on the loans? I'm just curious. It's not a big deal. We have the information, but why are you asking for that?
It just gives us an idea of how the school's growing. There's no covenant that, if it shrinks or if it grows. It's just a report that we like to see. It's just to kind of keep an idea as to how the school district is doing on an annual basis.
All right.
Yeah, it's not tied to any covenants or any defaults or anything like that. It's just an informational report.
Okay.
For the whole district, not for
Right.
that building.
Exactly, for the whole district.
And it tells you essentially how much income you have coming in.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. Got it.
And you skipped over the prepayment fee. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Sure, if you'd like me to. The way we have this set up, the prepayment, you can actually prepay, but there is a penalty if you do prepay early. You can do that on any payment date with a 30-day notice. So you just have to give us 30 days and then do the prepayment on the payment date. And as you can see, there is penalties for that. It's 5% during years 1 through 6, 4% in year 7, 3% year 8, 2% in year 9, and then 1% in years 10 through 13.
So you really don't want us paying early?
No, and there's kind of reason. There is room in the documents. There always is to prepay a small amount, and I think it's like 10% that you can pay annually on the facility to pay down the principal without any penalty. And actually, too, if you had excess cash and you wanted to pay down the loan, that's probably something you could come, to the bank and say, we have excess cash and we'd like to make a principal reduction. And that's something I can't, commit to that, but it's a discussion that we could have.
Okay.
The only thing, when you do a loan like this, you may or may not know, banks, they actually go out and they match fund loans. And so once the capital is out the door and it gets paid off early, then those match funds get broken.
I understand.
So, but we are able to prepay a certain percentage without the penalty, 10% or
Yes,
something?
and I think it's like 10%. I don't
Okay.
have the actual financing agreement in front of me, but it does allow for a little bit of prepayment
Okay.
without penalty.
Okay. Other questions for Sharon?
The penalties really aren't excessive. They're very similar to a home equity loan penalty, prepayment penalty structure.
Mhm.
I mean, just looking at it, it's not excessive. So, the other requirements, it says the loan is subject to documentation acceptable to the bank. What does that mean?
Normally, what happens is the school district's bond council prepares the documentation, and then those documents get reviewed by bank's counsel and by the bank. And there's never any issues. I mean, it's standard documents that I've been using for 25 years, so there's never an issue on it. It's just something you have to throw in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay.
Good,
Thank you very
Sharon.
much.
I'm glad we
Appreciate it,
could-
and thank you guys very much
Yeah,
for the
appreciate you
opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for
My
coming and
pleasure.
explaining this. I'm glad we can do this locally too.
Yes, we are too. That's what we're here for, community.
that's great.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving along, draft funding resolution. This is in our packet. It's a resolution we had drawn up to put all this into place, and we'd like to possibly make this an action item in our May meeting. But this is for us to discuss tonight, to mull over the next couple of weeks. Andy, did you have any input on this to start with?
No, I think it's important to be very specific on our council, because it's special counsel that actually has crafted this. It's not bond counsel, because this is not a bond, this is a loan. And our special counsel is Ann Sherman, and she developed this. The resolution is the formal action that would be required for you as a board to approve in order to move ahead with approval of the loan. And that's somewhat what Sharon was referring to. Once that action is taken, then the additional paperwork and processes would be put in motion at that point. I do have there the suggested date of your May 11th regular meeting, and would encourage you to give consideration at that point. And of course, that's entirely up to you. If you were to move that to your June meeting, say for instance, we would just need to work very carefully with Columbia Bank and Sharon and reestablish the potential schedule for what the debt service would look like.
Yeah.
Because she didn't state it there, at least I didn't hear her, but these are, what you have in front of you is guaranteed for 30 days, and so that's through the May 15th date.
Okay.
So if you were to take action on May 11th, then everything would maintain its integrity. If it were after that point, then we'd go back to them, they recalculate, it could adjust the 2.68% interest rate, maybe not, it may go up, it may go down. I mean, everything is unknown at this point in time.
Yeah, okay. Any discussion on this tonight?
Only question I have is the dollar amount. Are we locked in on that dollar amount?
No, that's
I haven't
a
seen-
not to exceed amount, Wally,
Okay.
and I think, in fact, that's a very good point. Let me share some information with you that might be very helpful for this conversation. The 2.5 million with the extra 50,000 for closing fees, attorney fees, et cetera, and all of the costs that Sharon was referring to is a not to exceed amount, and the estimated cost of the project itself is 2.5 million. And so with that said, this resolution provides the authority for me and for the business manager, Scott Pillar, to actually work directly with the bank in coordinating, negotiating, finalizing the terms of a loan based upon that not to exceed amount. And again, I think the semi-annual payments are the way to go. Of course, if you as a board had any input to that specifically, you could surely do that and let us know. The other piece that I want to bring up to you is that $2.5 million, the payment on that over the course of the next 13 years is based upon revenue generated from a number of non-general fund sources. So as we discussed, and each one of you received at your January meeting, I gave you another copy in your packet, that the revenue for remaining land sale contracts is just a little over $1 million. Estimated construction excise tax revenue for the next 13 years is about $950,000. Lease agreements for a charter school is $275,000. And so with all of that said, I'm pleased to report that on Friday of last week, we actually received the payoff for the land sales contract for the Steelhammer property. So the district received a check for $342,000. That was not anticipated for nearly 2 more years. And so the owner of that property was pleased to be able to make that a payment and work with Northwest Road Realty Group in helping to make that happen. And of course, they worked with you in order to facilitate this whole process. So I'm sharing that with you because that revenue would be earmarked for payment of this. So with that $342,000 cash in hand, you'd actually be able to back off on the total loan amount by that amount, simply because you now have that money. So that, again, those are the kind of variables that will be part of the conversation that Scott Pillar and I would have with the Columbia Bank representatives when we finalize the papers once the board approves this authorization.
Yeah, and I kind of want to point that out too. I've heard some questions around town lately about money, or this is a loan against the general fund, and money for the payments is going to come out of the general fund, but that's not true.
That's not true. There's a risk.
There's a risk. Of course,
there's no doubt
always
about
is.
it. And when you total up the potential amount of revenue, and again, keep in mind this maintains the $1.5 million that you currently have in your long-range capital funds account. It doesn't touch that. That money is dedicated to the rest of the schools in the district. But if you were to take all of the anticipated revenue over the course of the next 13 years, and consider the potential for future land sales. You've had some discussions about Eugene Field property. You've also had some discussions about a portion of Mark Twain property. So if those two do not happen, there's a risk that you may have to tap into some general fund revenue at some point in the future. And my estimate for that is about $57,000 a year, the maximum amount at some point in the future. But surely with the amount of revenue that you have right now, you're not going to even need to consider general fund revenue anytime. If you sell Eugene Field and you sell a portion of the Mark Twain property, one or both even, I think you have a high probability of making full payments on this without touching general fund at all in 13 years.
That's good. Good news.
Good.
Okay, any other discussion on this part before we have Dan Hess come up? Okay, Dan. Dow IBI Group.
Do we need to move?
Yeah, at least you guys folks in the middle
Yeah.
probably ought to move out. He's going to have a PowerPoint, and Dan has some hard copies for you as well. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah.
Dan's here to talk about our preliminary architect findings on the Schlater project.
Thanks very much.
Skip the song.
Stay over there.
Okay, we're off to a good start. The technology worked. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to give you guys an update. As you probably know from the last board meeting, where Andy kind of briefed you on where we are in the process, our finish line to get this step one completed is towards the end of May. We're planning to do a presentation. I think it's the May 18th or 19th.
The main work session, yeah, was the 18th, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So this is to give you guys a status. That would be the final kind of analysis with budget numbers, so you can see how the project is really developing and where the dollars would go. So we're right in the middle of this, and I'll just jump into this. So far what we've done are consultant site visits. So that's us and then engineering consultants that are working for us, which are mechanical, electrical, plumbing, a kitchen designer, and a civil engineer who've been to the site, taken notes, and now are working on an assessment of the property. We've had a preliminary meeting with the city regarding code and site issues. I think you guys know about that. We've also coordinated with the city regarding the traffic study. The traffic study is underway. I had a conversation on Friday with the fellow who's working on that. It's DKS Associates. They're a consultant to the city. It's the city's traffic report. They're not working for us, but he shared with me where they are. They've completed their traffic counts, and now they're working on their analysis and recommendations, which he's thinking in the next couple of weeks he'll have a draft report to give to the city with findings. That piece of it is probably the biggest wild card in all of this, because where that lands and what percentage of that the school district is responsible for will have obviously potentially a big impact on this project. So we don't have that information yet. We won't for a while. In the meantime, we're moving forward, and then the last thing on our list is a preliminary education specification meeting with the staff, which we've done. We met with middle school teachers and with Andy, and we're working through a program so that just like if this was a new project, we'd have the right spaces, the right arrangement of spaces, and we're about 90% done with that. We've shared it with Andy, and I think we need to follow up with the staff again to make sure we're on the right track. By the way, if you have questions, just ask.
I do have one question. So
Yeah.
the consultant the city's using, they're going to come out with a report. My assumption is the city will take that and massage it. They won't just take it carte blanche. They'll,
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. They might,
so may or may not.
yeah. So in progress, like I said, the traffic impact analysis, review of Schlater building findings with school district staff. So just like the city wants to take a look at the report, we're meeting with Andy and Joel and getting their input. So for example, I have a conference call with Joel and our mechanical engineer this week to discuss their findings, interface engineering, their findings on mechanical issues, just to make sure Joel's understanding of the building and what the engineer has looked at are on the same page. Our report will be in these three levels, level 1, 2, 3. Level 1 is the most serious things that you need to deal with in our recommendation that really would, for example, there's a couple rooms on campus that don't seem to have any heat source, or they just have an old baseboard heater. So those two classrooms would be level 1, need to do something. There's different things we can do, but they'd be something you'd have to address. Level 2 would be, if the budget allows, it'd be nice to do like paint all the walls in the school or something like that. And then level 3 would be really not necessary, but just things we notice that you need to know about. So the review of the ed spec, like I mentioned, we need to do that. We're also working on getting some cost and budget information from modular building companies, and there's a number that we've contacted and that have responded. There's a gal with Blazer Industries who lives here in Silverton, I guess. She's been helpful. Trying to get costs of new and refurbished units, and the availability of refurbished units. That's certainly a cost opportunity or a budget opportunity that we're looking at. And then finally, what I need to do in the next couple weeks is put together a memo and meet with the city to make recommendations on what code upgrades we think are required for this project. For example, do we need to add fire sprinklers, or do we need to add a fire alarm system or upgrade the fire alarm system, things like that? Are there exit doors that we think need to be replaced? The city has been very open about wanting to partner with the district to use common sense solutions to code issues. They're not going to throw the book at you. But they want it to be a safe school, a safe middle school. They want it to meet minimum code requirements within reason. And so there's a number of issues that Daryl at the city has said, tell you what, why don't you make a proposal and then we'll sit down and talk about it. So after we've done our findings, now I'm getting ready to be able to put together a memo and see where we stand on that and what the cost implications will be. I'm not expecting anything huge. I think there's some things that have to happen, but I don't see anything earth-shattering coming out of this. So, level 1, here's just to give you a flavor of what we're finding. Architecturally, there's some rooms with damaged flooring. There's a few rooms with floor tile that appears to be asbestos.
Is that something that really needs to be addressed if we're not disturbing it?
No, you don't have to. And if it's not broken or chipped, it's not something you need to do. But it's something to be aware of.
Sure.
Some ceiling repair necessary. So there's some classrooms that have the glue-up square tile. Some cases, some of them have fallen down, a handful. So things like that have to go on the list. There's a handful, very few classrooms where you look at it and you just say, it's gone, you need to put a new ceiling in. And in a few classrooms, there's some cabinet damage, countertop damage that probably should be repaired before students occupy the building. Mechanically, again, not a lot of earth-shattering items. There's probably some HVAC improvements that have to happen in the multipurpose area. There's our mechanical engineer thought that it might be worth thinking about adding ventilation or increasing the ventilation in the gym, but again, that may not be a level 1 thing, that may be a level 2. It's functioning, it's been that way for many years, doesn't necessarily need to be upgraded.
And we're using it.
And you're using it,
Yeah.
right. And then, like I mentioned, there's some classrooms that just don't have any heat or any usable heat, so. Any questions?
So for the new heat source, what sort of, are you
Well-
far enough along that you have some ideas about what that might be?
The most cost-effective would be new electric baseboard heaters. That would be the most cost-effective. There's other more long-term solutions, little packaged gas-powered units that would go on the roof. Those are more expensive. So we'll look at a few options.
Can you also look into cost of ownership of those items as well?
Say that again.
Can you also look into cost of ownership of the options as well? So I expect the baseboard heats can be more expensive to operate.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sure. Yes. Yeah.
On the gym you mentioned, I heard that when we discontinued use of the campus, we took the heat source away, and then the heating that's in there now was kind of a temporary, well, it works, but you mentioned the ventilation, and what I had understood was that it was, because we're only using it occasionally, it's just natural ventilation and circulation of air is enough, but if there's more bodies in there, will all that
That's the
moisture
thing,
and
yeah.
will that deteriorate mold and
That's,
you understand where I'm going?
Yeah, exactly. That's the issue. So we need to evaluate that. If it's really used on a daily basis, 6-7 periods a day with 1 or 2 PE classes going on in there at once, really what's the best long-term solution? Electrical, in general, the electrical distribution system was in good shape. It is in good shape throughout the building. Didn't seem to be panels that need to be replaced or wiring that's a problem. In terms of lighting, again, the gym, it's got really old lighting. It's kind of dim in there. If the budget allows, we would really recommend upgrading with better lighting in there. There's no windows. I think that would be a good thing if you can afford it. And then there's a few classrooms here and there that, maybe have a few lamps that are burnt out. That's easy, just replace the lamps, but there might be some fixtures that need to be replaced also. Not a lot of this, but some. The kitchen, there's some issues in there. It's practically every component needs a little bit of attention. The warewashing, in other words, the dishwashing system needs to be upgraded. For example, it doesn't have, code requires in a commercial kitchen a 3-compartment sink. You don't have one of those. I think you're going to need that. The serving line, Typically, and we met with your staff to talk about this, serving lines typically need the hot food wells. That's where the kids get their food. You don't have that. The existing convection ovens may be okay, but we haven't fired those up yet, so we don't know. The walk-in cold storage rooms, we hope they're okay. Again, they haven't been fired up, so we need to do that to see if they work. Technology, so we're talking about data throughout the project, primarily classroom technology, wireless, that sort of thing. The first thing to check is the service to the site, and that's good. The district has got good fiber going to the building. Inside the building, though, a lot of the cabling is Cat 5, which is an older style of cabling, and so it's adequate, but if we're going to do any wireless, or may even need to look at upgrading some of the wiring, for example, to a testing lab, that sort of thing. If the wireless, if there needs to be wireless in classrooms, for example, then that may need to be upgraded, at least in the teaching areas, maybe not in the whole building, but in the classrooms. And then the phone system from Eugene Field, I think our consultant understanding is it's fairly new, and that could be just relocated to Schlater, and as well as the the active electronics that the school district supplies for the technology rooms, for the hub rooms, those could be moved over to Schlater and reused. So that would be a good cost savings. And then finally, code and life safety. So it looks like a new fire alarm system is probably needed. There may be some fire sprinkler upgrade. That's an area that we're going to talk to the city about in regards to how far we need to go with that. Egress lighting upgrade. You'll need to add some battery wall packs in hallways. I don't think there is any functioning egress lighting in that school right now. We're still analyzing whether additional student toilets are required. The plumbing code requires a certain amount of toilets based on the student capacity, and we're trying to make sure you don't need to add any toilets, but there's a possibility that you might. And then probably the biggest issue with the city is the separation of the oldest part of the building, the mothballed part of the building, with as a fire separation between the occupied areas and that. So that's probably the thing I need to do the most homework on, is what can I propose that makes sense, that isn't overly invasive, but also provides the right kind of protection.
Dan, have you guys looked at isolating the building from the big building is an earthquake hazard?
Right.
Is there any, have you
That,
looked into it, or?
it's not on here, but I'm going to get some recommendations
Okay.
from the structural engineer as to what we might need to do there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So just a quick question about the fire separation. What does that entail? Does that entail new
Well,
construction or
It might.
some kind of demolition or?
It probably won't involve any demolition. It may require a new firewall. If you imagine on either end, just adding like a stud wall with layers of sheetrock on it, and then the full height of the interior space. And sometimes they require it to kind of wrap back on the ceiling a little ways, just to provide kind of a envelope protection.
Slow it down, essentially.
Slow it down, yeah. And also there are doors. They're boarded up now, but there are doors that lead into there. And I do think we're going to have to replace those with 90-minute rated fire doors. It's not it's not the end of the world. It's $2,500 to $3,500 a door. But it's something that has to be done. Otherwise, it has to be fully sealed off, and you wouldn't be able to get in there. And I don't think you want that. So the last thing I was going to talk about is we are aware that there's been some creative ideas floated about possibly reusing the shop buildings. I call it the ag shop, but the shop buildings, these existing shop buildings, and what would be entailed. So we asked our consultants, as well as we did it ourselves, to take a look at the building and just in the same way that we're looking at the rest of the campus. So the things we found are that most architectural finishes need to be replaced, and I'm talking about flooring, ceiling, I'm not talking about wallboard, but floor, ceiling, and probably would need to be painted, patched and painted in a lot of locations. New walls and partitions obviously would be required. New HVAC would be needed for the new classrooms, possibly elsewhere, but at least in the new areas that you're creating. The electrical engineer we had looking at it said the electrical distribution system is unsafe and needs to be replaced if you're going to use that building. And that's all the panels, all the wiring. He also felt that the lighting is just not in usable shape. It would need to be replaced. Technology systems are old and need replacement. You'd certainly, if you were going to have any data, any computer capability in there, you'd need to upgrade the data cabling. Fire alarm and the egress lighting, again, are old and they need replacement. And we didn't have a structural engineer come down. I didn't want to go that far, but our review indicates there's obviously some structural issues. Things have been flagged. The city's aware of that. And I didn't necessarily put it here, but, well, particularly seismic. So if you were going to use this building, you'd probably want to look at doing some seismic upgrade. So there'd be some structural repair, I think that would need to happen, and then some seismic upgrade to make it, in our opinion, a safe environment for students. So we took a look at what budgets might be for this, and this is not a cost estimate. We haven't designed anything, so we're just budgeting. And we're assuming no work on the exterior, so no roof, no new siding, no new windows, no new exterior doors. This is just interior remodel costs. And based on what we think the architectural work would be, cost per square foot could be in the range of, this is a 10,000 square foot building, so $20 to $35 a square foot is a pretty minimal budget to do all this stuff, but I think you could probably pull it off. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing, again, another $30 to $40 a square foot probably. And the structural, that's a wild card. I would say for seismic upgrade, at the very least, $10 a square foot. 25 might be more prudent to plan for. That gets you budgets anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million. We also talked to a cost estimator and said, look, what are you seeing in terms of remodel costs, interior remodel costs for new buildings, for existing schools? And he said the number he would give us, a little conservative, but to play it safe, and that would include everything, would be $65 a square foot. So that would get you, if you're remodeling the whole building, plan on about $650,000. So my high is just, what if you find worse things in a typical remodel? What if you find more electrical or more seismic you have to deal with? Again, it's just a range of costs. I don't, and of course, it's no exterior work. We're assuming none of that. So this is just informational, just be helpful. And I think that's my last slide. So
just a question about reuse of the ag shop. How many classroom spaces would that create? Just on, rough.
I don't have the sketch in front of me. I forget. Do you remember anything?
70. You mean that we received from a community member?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was estimated at 7 of varying sizes classrooms.
What would the lifespan of those be? After this remodel here you're talking about, roughly.
Well, if you really, did it more on,
It's
I
stick
think-
built. It seems like it's going to last longer than modular.
yeah, it's 10 to 20 years probably. I mean, if you really did this, but again, we're not doing anything on the outside,
Yeah.
so that
I
would
know
be,
that.
Yeah.
re-roofing and siding and windows.
Yep.
that drives it up a little, but
Oh.
on the interior, sure,
I'm just doing the comparison of this and
Yeah.
modulars.
right. I will say we're hoping the modulars come in under this, and that's certainly a goal.
So what, just your best guess, what do you think are, the likelihood is that we'll be able to find refurbished modulars?
I think it's likely. I think we're going to have to be, you're going to have to be sort of nimble in, we have to be ready to do it. It's sort of like finding that used car that you've been looking for. And once it's on the market, you gotta buy it. And that's the thing with the used modulars. They don't just have a yard full of used modulars. They're big things. It's, you have to find a customer who's wanting to, unload them. And then if you're ready, so that's one of the things that we're gonna talk to these modular folks about is how do you procure used modulars? I've worked on one project where that happened. It was a replacement school in Sheridan for an elementary school that was sort of the age of Eugene Field, but it burned down, and so they had to build a new school out of modulars, and they got used modulars, and it can be done.
So throughout your presentation here, you've shared with us what you've begun to learn, what the needs are likely to be in your explorations. We don't have anything definite yet.
Nothing definite.
Nothing definite. So just, this is a terrible question to ask, but you know what kind of budget we're talking about,
Yes.
or you listen to the conversation. Assuming sort of the best case scenario with all this, is that doable?
I think it is. I think it's going to be, there's going to take a lot of creativity, but I think it's doable. I think you want to make a school that really feels like a good middle school. The terms that Andy has used with me is, he keeps reminding me, it's adequate and compliant, and so that's what we're looking at. I think the biggest sort of wild card is the off-site costs associated with the city. So really, over the years, I've heard ranges, and the high range scares me. So I'm assuming, I really don't think that's where it's going to end up. But we won't know for a couple of weeks, I think, maybe 3 weeks.
And you touched on it, but at the joint work session, the huddle of city officials,
Yeah.
as we were discussing that, kind of made me nervous, the things they were talking about. So we'll find out.
Yeah.
Other questions for Dan? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion on this before we move on?
Jim, if I can chime in just a little bit,
Yeah.
Dan is still here. One of the, he was speaking of restrooms, and one of the considerations that has been mentioned, and I've asked Dan to consider, and that we've already had preliminary discussions with Community Roots Charter School, is the potential placement of classrooms for Community Roots Charter School adjacent to the stadium restroom facility. So they would have their independent space, they would have independent restrooms, and they would have access to one of the greenhouses, and also an area that would fit well within the Montessori curriculum, especially specific to outdoor activities and biological activities and hands-on activities. And so we think there's some real potential for that consideration, and Dan has got that in the mix as he's looking at development of the Schlager site. I think it has some merit. I just want to make certain that you and the public is aware as well that Dan is spot on. It's going to take some creative thinking, but the creative thinking can also result in an outcome that does meet some of the needs for our charter school as well as middle school needs as well, independently.
So they would be kind of off to the north there a bit then?
Correct.
Okay.
So what would those be like? I mean, it's like, we're not talking about porta potties or,
No, they're fully functioning, very large restrooms that are used for football games or activities.
The ones in
okay.
the snack bar
I
buildings
see.
here,
Correct.
with the,
Okay.
Correct.
the stadium.
right, thanks.
Right, they're quite
I
large.
get it.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
That could be a good fit. Good. Okay, moving on. District-wide special education programs. Basic skills, functional skills from Eugene Field to Scotts Mills.
Good evening.
Linda,
Hi.
how are you?
At our last board session, we talked a bit about moving the basic skills and functional skills classrooms to Scotts Mills, and you asked me to gather some additional information, and I've done that. Andy and I sent out letters to the parents of our functional skills and basic skills kids at Eugene Field, and they came out to Scotts Mills to take a tour, to really look at the whole facility, and while they were visiting there, really tried to listen to their heart and concerns that they had about their children. So I've prepared you a list of the concerns that I've heard. I believe many of these concerns can be addressed within each student's IEP. We would certainly have to bring the appropriate staff members out there. We'd certainly have to bring our school nurse out there to provide that support for them. So those are things that we could overcome. The things that we can't overcome is the distance it is from the hospital. I can't overcome the length of the bus rides from further areas in our school district. And those would be very significant, especially when we look at our basic skills and functional skills students. Oftentimes they're our most vulnerable, or our students with the most health concerns that we need. So given that insight, we can certainly work together to overcome like the concrete halls. There are very many different levels. The bathrooms need to be adjusted. We could do all those. But with the thought of safety and how far our students will be from the hospital, it's my recommendation that you really look at the thought of maybe moving some of the third graders or all the third graders and not move our functional skills and basic skills kids. I would really want to keep our students in those programs within the context of the city area. We do have students that come from K-8 schools, but that's about 30% of our students. Most of our students are actually in district. Also, when you're looking at special education and our special education law, one of the strong elements is to provide that instruction in the neighborhood school. And so we've been able to do that. Our K-8 students do come into town to get some more of that specialized support, but really the long-term recommendation should be to keep our special ed kids in the center of our school district, providing them the help and support and safety they need. Within that, every year looking at the needs of the kids and making sure we have their appropriate speech, OT, nurse, and everything in each building that those kids need. So any other questions?
So it sounds like 70% of the kids are from town,
Mhm.
and of the 30, if town's pretty centralized for both the south and north. And
If we had kids out at Scotts Mills, we have some of our students that are all the way over by Sublimity.
yeah.
And so you put them on a school bus, and that's a long, long way for a student with health or behavioral concerns
Yeah.
coming into town. We really try to keep the routes below an hour, and that's really pushing it. We've added additional bus routes so we can keep those times as short as possible. But when you have a child that's living that far out and just the distance driving into a car is 25 minutes, you put a bus in there, it's a really, really long time. So I'd be more happy to give you any more additional insight about our functional skills, basic skills kids. We'd love for you to come out and visit our kids. But we really need to keep them in town to keep them safe.
Is there a possibility of more of a split perhaps? Because we've been told that the other meeting that there's absolutely no room here either. So there's no room here, there's no room there. But what about being more specific for each child's needs? I can understand that more physical limitations be closer in town, but there really is more room at Scotts Mills. Is there a possibility to kind of have some kind of balance between the two and do it more as an individual basis rather than just like grouping them and saying you're in Scotts Mills or grouping them and saying you're in town? You know, look more at each individual child and say, okay, these ones need to be definitely closer to a hospital. You know, we can use this section of one of the schools, and then ones that maybe don't have those kind of limitations be in Scotts Mills. I don't know. I mean, there's not a great solution for sure. You know, ideally there would be 3 extra classrooms for them, no problem, along with the other kids.
Right.
You know, so I'm just thinking, is that even a possibility? Or
We always look at the individual needs of each individual child when we're writing those IEPs. But we also, as a district, need to look at the services that we provide and how can we most efficiently provide those services. And we gradually, over the years, continue to up the level of support that we have from specialists. And so keeping all those specialists in town where the kids are is most cost effective and more efficient. We could always look at more kids being in a learning resource center, but when you're looking at our functional skills kids, those are kids that need to have their instruction really tailored to them. They have a lot of motor, PT, nursing. It's all for those students, and so there's a nearly 1-to-1 in each one of those classrooms. The basic skills kids are kids that really need to learn in groups of 2 and 3. They need to have their instruction at a lower level. So if we started pulling groups of kids out, it would be causing more busing to all. Now we're going to take this group and we're going to send them over at Scotts Mills. It's really, we really need to keep our kids in town and develop really strong supportive programs for those kids. We've been working very hard in the K-8 schools to provide full-time assistants at each one of the schools, looking at the special ed teachers to make sure they're good caseloads. So we're really looking at all those, but our basic skills kids have some significant, very specific needs. They're wonderful kids and they need to stay closer to town.
I'm glad. But we're back to the problem. We don't seem to have enough room in town.
Well, or do we?
Okay, there we go.
If we were
we've got evaluations on Robert Frost.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not really a great option. I think that there needs to find the money to figure out how to keep everybody in town. There's not a great solution for Robert Frost either. You know, they don't have the room. We've gone and we've evaluated that. They don't have the room either. So we need to figure out where the money's coming from and put it part of the budget, because just like Community Roots, they're another part of our community that we need to make adjustments for.
So is that really true? Couldn't we split the 3rd grade class between Eugene Field and Robert Frost?
Yeah, I'll just give you a quick summary from the discussion we had last month, or earlier this month, is we had 3 options that we had considered. One of them was movement of all the 3rd graders to Robert Frost, and the other one was moving basic skills, functional skills to Scotts Mills School, and the third was splitting the 3rd graders. And I was pretty clear, and I continue to be pretty definite in my recommendation that we not move all the 3rd graders to Robert Frost. I do think there are plenty of implications with that would create some significant concerns for this district. However, knowing this information and knowing Linda's recommendation and knowing that we have additional information to keep the basic skills, functional skills kids at Eugene Field School, I think it's a reasonable consideration. It's really the only one you have left. You need to find at least 2, if not 3 additional classrooms at Eugene Field. You're right, Julie, we're full. We don't have room for full-day kindergarten, and part of the reasons that I recommended moving the special needs programs to begin with is because Scotts Mills has room for that to occur. So in the most simplistic terms, that made sense. With the additional information, I get it, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't come to the top of the priority or recommendation list. However, we need room, and we have begun some consulting. I think you received an email recently about speaking with neighboring churches to schools. We've begun some of those conversations. We found pretty serious limitations with that when we've gone down that path in the past. But I do think there's some potential, especially, let's say, First Christian Church next to Eugene Field School, where we may be able to get some support from them. So at this point, I think your most reasonable and appropriate option is to move, work with Jennifer Hannon and district administration in developing a plan to move up to 3 classes of 3rd graders from Eugene Field to Robert Frost beginning this August. I think it's your solution.
I don't think that's a good solution.
I
I mean-
understand.
I mean, really, you're, all of a sudden now when we split the high school students for a few years, and you had the freshmen over here and the seniors over there, the social groups that came out of that were not the same as having the freshman through senior. So now you're going to split up these classes. That doesn't bring union. That causes more problem when they get back. It's kind of like, that freshman year all over again.
I agree.
At this point, I keep on falling back on we're not quite ready to move forward. We don't have a great solution for these kids. We don't even have a good solution for these kids. It's very frustrating to watch because, I can understand your point, but at the same time, separating a third grade class and putting half of them here and half of them there and, saying we'll work with you guys later because there has to be a little bit more thought process before we move forward on that. That's separating kids again.
But at the same time, this is a one-year deal.
I don't. Does it sound like a one-year deal? Because I didn't.
It
get
is a one.
that.
It is a one-year deal.
It would be a one-year solution.
We're out of Eugene Field the year after this next one.
And we do
So
some
it's a
K-8 schools all the time. We split classes between half a third grade class of second grade, half a third grade class of fourth grade.
But they're in the same facility.
They are.
I mean, that's a big difference.
I know it's not ideal. We don't have an ideal solution, but we need more space at Eugene Field. I can't support moving all the third graders to Robert Frost. There isn't that much room at Robert Frost. But I think they're, thanks to our awesome staff who will make things work, I think we can, to me, it doesn't, and I know we've heard talk about, well, set up a couple more modulars down at Eugene Field. Well, to me, it doesn't make sense to spend $50,000 or whatever that would be for a one-year solution either.
And use more space.
And I want to thank the parents who sent us, of the special ed kids who sent us the letters. That was really informative.
That's what we
so
needed.
Thank you. And after we got those and thinking about it a little more, it seems to me like the solution would be to move, like Andy said, a few classes of third graders. I know it's not ideal. You're splitting the third graders. It's teacher collaboration, all that stuff, but all that stuff can possibly be worked out, and it's a one-year deal. So,
Tim and Todd, you did some observations over Robert Frost. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's going to be packed. I guess I'm not too worried. Well, I don't like the one-year deal. I mean, it's fine, but I mean, we were discussing a permanent move out to Scotts Mill, so therefore there must have been a permanent. Is there enough room in town permanently going forward? That's kind of what I thought the reason for the permanent move. I mean, is there enough room in town? Is there enough room going forward? Is there enough room in town for all the kids in special ed? That's kind of what I thought was the reason.
Well, and as we move ahead with moving the K-1-2 students to Mark Twain, we're going to have to look at that, putting the special needs kids from in the K-1-2 at Mark Twain and the grades 3, 4, and 5 at Robert Frost in age appropriate levels. Tom, that's what we're talking about right now. Over the course of the next year, we could sure look at other options if they're there, but. That's if we're not going to move the basic skills, functional skills students to Scotts Mills, and we are going to keep them in town, then that's really what our options are limited.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with I guess I'm still trying to figure out why we had a one-year problem and we were going for a permanent move, and I'm still trying to figure out where. I assume there must have been no room in town. When the Slater Street project's done, I guess I was under the assumption that when the Slater Street project is done, there's not going to be.
Yet.
Okay. I
thought
assumed it had because that was a permanent move. But
I think the discussion we had, though, we wanted to not have more disruption
For you guys, though.
year after year.
Yeah, there were advantages to that.
Okay.
In addition to just
Sure.
moving, Tom. I mean, and it
Sure.
didn't have to do with just that. Well, I like the minimizing the transitions and other benefits
Okay.
that we saw as potentially. We've actually been talking about this for a couple of years, more in a conceptual way more than anything.
Okay.
And then now we come to a point where clearly there's a need. Then we put it a little more behind it, and that's how we got.
Sure, there's just so many things up in the air right now. It's just great. One of the things we did when on another option to consider, and once again, it's probably not another popular option, but when we on the resolution to close Eugene Field, we talked about moving boundaries.
Mhm.
And there's room at Silvercrest, there's room at Scotts Mills for students. That would get kids out there, create some room in town, and it would also create, if you get those buildings up to closer to their capacity, they'll be above this. They won't need the small school subsidy anymore, and you'll get closer to straight grade buildings. And if you get rid of the small school subsidy, that's $70,000 in district-wide savings.
So what if next year, the kids came to Eugene Field, the kindergartner kids, and there are two groups, two classrooms of kindergartner kids. I got on the bus and went out to Scotts Mills. There's two beautiful rooms out there ready to learn. Those kids, you know, they wouldn't get Eugene Field, they would move in with the kids when they moved to Mark Twain, but could we take two classes of Eugene Field kindergarten kids and have them go out to Scotts Mills
For next year?
for a 1-year deal? I don't want to do it.
There's room.
It's a little bit more likely to do that, or we pause a year and just kind of, slow
That
down a
seems-
little bit.
We don't have time to pause a year.
Well,
we have
you have to have
we have
room for
another
the
school
kids.
year coming up, but we need to
Yes.
Well,
decide
we could-
how we're going to make room for full-day
We
kindergarten.
could elect not to have full-day kindergarten.
That was an option that I thought was just kind of like, it's an option. It's a real option.
We've already elected to have full-day kindergarten,
Well, true.
so now we're here.
That's true.
I don't think we back off on full-day kindergarten. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty big risk to not having
Yeah.
full-day kindergarten. I
At
understand
this
that,
point.
and you're right, Tom, it is a solution, but I think there's significant economic risk to this district if you do not have full-day kindergarten.
And as far as the boundary question, to me, that's more of a long-term solution. We've never
Yeah.
adjusted boundaries where we haven't grandfathered kids in.
Yeah.
So you can keep going to your.
Oh, I
school.
know, and it's a hot button issue.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's more of a long-term solution. I think we need to bite the bullet and just make a decision and say what we're gonna do for next year. You know, we
You're out.
can't talk and talk about it forever. We have another year coming on us where we need to start making plans.
So it sounds like we have two viable options. One, moving kindergarten to couple busloads of kids to Scotts Mills for kindergarten, or move 2 or 3 classrooms of 3rd graders to Robert Frost. Those are really the two viable options.
Well, I don't know if the moving kindergartners out to Scotts Mills has even been discussed amongst the
I'm sure it
principals
has.
and administrators. And
Well, we know we have the room to do it at Robert Frost. I mean, a very large
Yeah.
6th grade class is leaving a very small 3rd grade class is coming in. We know we have the room at Robert Frost to be able to absorb 2, possibly 3 kindergarten classes up there, and I think we've done our homework on that fairly well.
it seems like it's.
Excuse me, thank you.
It seems like it'd be less disruptive just to have those classes, those kids go play around. Kindergartners out to Scotts Mills.
Yeah, and I think
It's an
that's a valid
option
point,
there.
trying to minimize the disruption as much as possible. at this time.
Do we need to have a vote on this, or is this just direction from the board?
I'm not comfortable moving ahead until I have some clear direction.
So we need a-
Well, meanwhile, I just wanted to thank all the commissioners for coming today. I really appreciate their time and effort. And if you ever have any concerns or questions, feel free to give me a call. I'm here to support you with your kids. And each one of your kids is very, very precious. Thanks for letting us come.
A good one. And thanks for Thank you.
Okay, we all, more discussion.
Well, and you know, Mr. Chair, I suggest that I do some additional work with administration and Jennifer Hannon at Eugene Field to discuss what that could look like. You know, we'll continue to investigate the options of support with neighboring churches as well. We need some direction no later than your May 11th meeting. And it really needs to occur. We're at that point right now. I think we have 1, possibly 2 good resolutions in order to get this to happen, and I think we're there. We need to move ahead.
So hopefully you can have a recommendation then for us.
I will clarify the recommendation for sure. Can I comment on a question that Tom asked, because I don't think
Yes.
that it was answered. Tom, you're correct. The resolution did include a full investigation of district-wide attendance boundaries during the 15-16 school year.
Yes.
We convened a committee to take a look at that, especially in the areas of Scotts Mills and Silver Crest, because those are our 2 schools that have the most room right now. And so with that said, you know, it's very, very likely, as far as I'm concerned, that any adjustments that would be made would not only help to increase the enrollment at those 2 schools, but would also help reduce the enrollment of town in order to make our transition even more fluid and more have more potential to adjust to the needs that we have here in town. Right now, we've done the math. We know that the schools have enough room in order to do it, but something like, let's say, keeping the special needs students in town, we under them at Mark Twain or Robert Frost will have an impact there, and the attendance adjustment will allow us to consider those at the same time.
Yeah, no,
I
I like that. I'm glad the kids are staying in town. And, you know, could you put one class of kindergartners up at Silvercrest, one out at Scotts Mills? They have room, and maybe some of those using open enrollment might decide to stick and fill up those buildings naturally. I don't know. It just might be, I don't know what those parents would think of that, but it's just some options to get some kids in some usable space.
I'm kind of questioning the rush at this point. I mean, we were reassured, I felt, last time that the option for sending the special needs kids out to Scotts Mills was like a really great solution, and we could make it work, and it was great. Looking into it, you know, a little bit more, it doesn't look like that's a great idea. We also have talked to Robert Frost and said, you know, you want to send kids up there, went and looked at it, not really a great viable option. And then at the same time, we're still talking about, you know, splitting it up, making it happen. And it feels very rushed to me at this point. I mean, I think there's an option out there. I think we need to look into it. But none of those things that we've talked about have lasted more than a few weeks almost, or a month or so. And that things keep changing, which is understandable. But to make this is the decision, I think we're being like almost, you got to make it today, and it's not working out. Every time we find out a little bit more information out, the special needs kids are not going to work out at, you know, Scotts Mills. Robert Frost really has these programs that are working for their school really well, and, you know, that's not like a great option either. It just feels kind of pressured to make an immediate decision today, or within the next couple weeks, and we don't have a great option, and granted, we don't have the money to make a great option either, and so it just, I don't have a good answer, damn it, Donald. Either, but I don't know. It just feels very much that way, because I am all for getting kids out of Eugene Field. I have no problem with that, but you have to have a place to put them, and you have to have a plan for the other kids that are all affected by it. And that's my 2 cents. It just feels very, very pressured.
Well, and for 1 year, it's not, I mean, you know, it's not an ideal plan anyway, but for 1 year, it's going to be less than ideal for somebody, you know, to have half the third graders at Robert Frost instead of all the third graders is a better idea than trying to move all the third graders up there. We need to do something, because we have full-day kindergarten coming, and we need more room at Eugene Field. So
It just feels like the lesser of two evils. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's a good solution for those kids, and those kids being split up. You know, that's their community too, and they've been trying to gather their friendships and move forward, and that's a pretty extreme year, our third grade. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
well, why don't you guys talk about it a little more and give us a solid recommendation at the May 11th meeting? But I would say we can't delay it past May 11th.
Gotta have a place for them next year.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll have a lively discussion May 11th.
Okay, summer roofing projects update. This is something we talked about in our last meeting. We've got some additional information from an attorney since then. Andy, do you want to?
Yeah,
Summarize a little
each one
bit.
of you received a copy of the most recent correspondence from your attorney specific to the roofing projects. And
Thank you.
we have, you have, folks, leave for a second. In that, with the attachment of that email from your attorney, I also clarified that my recommendation is just as strong as it's been, that you approve that contract that has been selected for the roofing projects this summer. Your attorney clarified, I think, fairly specifically that the process is used, your specification determination for this project, the selection process where everything was done appropriately, impartially, was fair, and also advised you that really doing anything other than approving the contract at this point in time may actually put the school district at risk from a standpoint of not honoring the process that we've done. Again, since it's been thorough and complete and compliant, you're in a very interesting position to do anything but grant that. That's how the system works. And so the most recent correspondence from your legal counsel, I believe, supports that. I think that the legal counsel is doing a thorough job in coming up with information to help you make your most informed decision in this matter. So I'm going to turn it back over to you with a recommendation again that you approve this contract for the roofing of your multiple buildings this summer, and that be approved at your May 11th meeting.
Well, I guess I got kind of a pointed question, but then what's the point of us voting on it?
You're the local contract review.
But if we vote no, we're illegal.
I think you run that risk.
So what's the point of voting on it?
Well, it's also,
What's the point?
We could elect not to do the project at all.
Yeah, I mean,
The problem is when we don't approve it, we could be accused of bid shopping.
true. I mean,
without
without
a valid reason. And it doesn't sound like we have a valid reason according to the attorney.
And we have the ability to spec out any material we wish.
True.
What we really bid out was the labor.
Right, we bid out the labor. But I guess, our lawyer who just sent us a letter says there is a criteria for rejection, and it says causes other than legitimate market forces threaten the integrity of the competitive procurement process. There was no competitive process for competitive material.
But we spec out the material. That's part of the bidding process.
True, and I certainly don't mind. I get that, but when it comes to our attention that maybe the material we spec'd out or the company is a little sketchy. I know if I was looking to hire an employee and I put the employee's name in the Google and I read some articles about that employee that kind of made me think differently, and I've done the same with Garland, and I go, I don't know, guys. This isn't, I just don't think it's cultivating character and integrity. I don't think, I'm under the impression that this company does not have strong character. They have a good product, but I think, by God, they might be charging way too much. I think. I don't know that for sure. That's my opinion.
But Tom, at the same time, we put the specs on what we needed for this roof. And Garland met the specs. Taylor Metal didn't have, the way I understand it, they didn't have something that would meet the specs. And Tom, I'm not finished.
Sorry.
They didn't have something that would meet the specs. And we followed everything we were supposed to do with this process. Taylor Metal didn't. And to me, according to the letter from our attorney, that's part of where the problem comes in, is we're taking the advice of Taylor Metal when they didn't even follow the protest things that have been set up in the procurement and stuff. They didn't follow that. And I mean, if we need to, down the road, if we need to look at specs and things like that, let's do it. But to me, it's not worth it to put the district at risk in this way for this project. I mean, I'm not willing to put the district at risk of getting sued by the contractor because for this reason. I just don't think I don't think it's in our best interest. I don't think it's in the district's best interest. I think it, for one thing, that makes us look bad as a district, I think.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's in our best interest to do it at this point. If we want to look at specs and things like that for different projects, which in my opinion too, that's why we hire people like Joel. That's not a board responsibility, a board decision as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, if that's something that we need to do, then let's do that. But it's not worth it to me to put the district at risk in this way over this project. That's how I feel about it.
No, yeah, fair enough. I'm sorry, didn't mean to. No,
that's okay.
Give the impression to interrupt. I could care less about Taylor Metals. I wasn't not rising to object on this because I won't think Taylor Metals is going to do a better job. They just kind of pointed out that there's a process that takes 135 pages of specs for them to try to figure it out, and they just walk away because it's too complicated, and it happens a lot. And there's lots of information on the internet accusing that, and there's not legitimate market forces in here. And I read the statute, and our lawyer didn't talk about the statute I read, into the record that says you can't have, the person writing the specs can't have a monetary interest in it. And I mean, I can read it again if you guys would like, but I won't bother with it, but that's,
Joel, would you?
I mean, go ahead. Well, do we allow public, are we gonna allow some input? Well, no, he's an employee, of course.
He's an employee.
I invite him. It's
While
okay.
while he's coming up.
Yeah.
I think personally, I think we would have been better off just to say we're going to use the Garland product XYZ
Sure.
rather than having to pile specs. But
Well, yeah, and I just, it's like saying I want a school bus, but you got to use a Dodge chassis, and well, Dodge knows it, so they're going to jack the price up, and they know they got the bid. And the guy putting the rest of the stuff on is where your competition. And I just don't think it's a good process. I don't like the fact that we're not allowing local, smaller, mid-level competition to come in here and have their shot at it. We're sending a lot of the products coming from Ohio, the checks going to Ohio, and I just don't agree with it. And that's fine. And
Yeah, well, then, I understand where you're coming from, Tom. I totally understand that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I go back to, if we're putting the district at risk with this particular project and the decision we made, I'm not willing to do that over this project. That's my opinion.
yeah,
And if there's things we need to look at for down the road and to do things differently down the road, then let's do that. But
well, and the reality is this is just one small piece of the overall project as well. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, that there was not a legitimate market force occurring in this process, and that's the way I see it. And I plan on voting no on this.
And I'd just like to, excuse me, just say I agree with Tom on this. I think the central issue that emerged in all of our conversation about this, which was very lengthy at the last meeting, is that the 130-page document, the bid specifications that we're relying on here, were written by the Garland Company, and they're written in such a way that they exclude other competitors from being a viable bidder. So. And this is the problem that this company has had all over.
They weren't written by Joel?
You like me to?
Yes,
I asked that
please
question
do.
at the last meeting.
Yeah.
The document, majority of that document, I want to say 93 pages, 98 pages, don't quote me on that, is a copy of the Oregon guide. It's legalese. It has nothing to do with roofing. It's 85 pages of who can sue who for what, who can cancel a contract for what during the process, what they have to pass for safety, and what they have to do. Has nothing to do with that. That 95 pages would be the same if we were working on a roof or if we were doing carpeting on a large scale. We were dealing with these kinds of dollar amounts where we had to go through a formal solicitation process. It's the majority of it. So that's to clear that piece up a little bit about who wrote what. That was written by attorneys for the state of Oregon and carefully reviewed every year, and everybody uses the same thing. We're using the same group of pages in our RFPs for seismic rehabilitation grants right now that were given to us by an attorney's office. That has nothing to do with this roofing project. So, so there's that. As far as writing the specifications, there is clear guidance in the ORSs for who is allowed to assist in writing specifications. Consultants, architects, engineers, manufacturers are all on that list. You can use a manufacturer to assist you in writing a specification. That's exactly what this process did, was use that. I guess, to talk about writing a spec, and this can be anything from, on anything we buy, that spec is always going to be written on the manufacturer's product. If we hire an architect to write a spec on roofing, he's not a roofing manufacturer. He doesn't know if there's a 18 gauge or a 22 gauge or a 13 gauge metal out there. He doesn't know if that panel is 4'6" or 5'9". What's he going to do? He's going to get a hold of a manufacturer to find something that works for the roof that they will warrant, because the architect isn't going to warrant anything. And he's going to build that spec based on the material that is available. If we hire a third-party consultant, a roofing consulting firm, which I know a few of you have talked to and have been in the middle of this discussion. They're the same thing. They may pick Garland as their spec. They may pick C-Plast. They may pick a menagerie of others. They're going to build that spec based on something that is available, not on what they dream up, because they're not going to build it.
But that consultant is working for us.
That's
I'm
right.
writing his check.
That's right.
And the guy helping you
Yeah,
works for Garland.
that's right.
And
That's right.
and does him helping that, does he realize a material competitive advantage by helping you write that spec?
Only if that spec requires that their material is sold to us, and it does
Then
not.
why would he be there if he wasn't expecting to get the job? Why would he sit down and say, I think I'll spec Taylor out?
The same reason that if we hire an architect or if we
Yeah.
hire a consultant, and that consultant goes out and asks a vendor, asks a supplier for information about their product so he can build a spec,
Yeah.
they're going to give it to him. Why are they going to give it to him? Because they want to sell their product.
Well, yeah.
They could say, figure out how to design that material yourself. He's just going to go to the next supplier. It's all based on the material that is available.
Yeah.
It's what everybody's spec is.
Yeah.
So are we as a school district precluded from actually just calling out that product rather than write that?
We are precluded, yeah, well, there are ways we can specify a product. Yeah, there's some process you have to go through to do that. In the specification that went out, you know, there's the spec is built around details, if you will, thickness of metal, how the joints are put together, all of these things, the warranty, the details of warranty length and what the warranty covers, all those things. And those things don't say Garland metal, they don't say
Right.
Armor Light roofing material. They are just a set of standards, just like if you went to buy a car and you said you wanted one with 4 doors, 4 wheels, and air conditioning. A lot of people can build something that's close to that. Now, also listed in there, Garland is listed in there as an approved material. So you list that, and that's a requirement that you list if there are known things that qualify for your spec. If there's a known car that's got those 4 doors and 4 wheels and air conditioner, that you list them. It is listed. It is not the only one out there. That's where the 2-page, everybody talks about this long drawn out process for being approved. Out of that 113, 135 pages, there's 2 pages that you have to go through to get your product to submit for product approval. It's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. I mentioned that at our last board meeting. We don't want just a 4-wheel car with 4 doors. We want to be a little more specific about what we put on our buildings. The life cycle, the life cycle of what we're doing here and the long-term cost of this district are huge between opening this up and putting on a roof that lasts 12 years and doing it again in 12 years and again another 12 years. We'll have done 3 roofs in the cost in the time frame that this roof will still be under warranty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like to see a process that says, I want a 30-year roof. Garland, send your man in. Duralast, send your man in. Someone else, send your man in. And now we got competition in materials and application.
And that's what we did. We said we want a 30-year warranty, we want metal, we want this thickness of metal, we want this fit guarantee on the finish, we want the whole list of it, multiple pages. Here's
So
what
no
we
one
want.
else. So no one else came in with no one
Yeah.
else. No Duralast came in. No one else. No other. That's the company I heard of. Is there's
Mhm.
no other companies that came in and said we can do something too?
No. There was a 2-page document on how they needed to submit their material, and no one did it.
But it was the Garland material. You spec'd out Garland material.
This-
I want a spec that says give me a 30-year roof.
Mhm.
That's what I want.
Which is what
I have no doubt that this Garland material is good stuff. I have no doubt about that at all. And that isn't the question. I want to know if I can get the same performance at a better value. That's what I want.
Well, I guess
And I don't see that from
maybe
this.
we're
And I
going
don't
back and
like.
forth and not.
I guess if nobody else brought in another product, maybe there's not another one out there.
Well, because we spec'd out Garland. It's like
We
it's
did the
like
specs, we didn't spec the company, did we?
We didn't spec the company, we spec the material, material qualities. There are other companies out there that have the same quality of material that did not choose to bid the project. nor did they choose to get their material approved.
Boy, I tell you, what paperwork I could give to this roofing consultant, it says in here, if you got, he just says that's what the whole thing was just a whole exclusionary, it was just all exclusionary.
Who is that, Tom?
According to Mr.
Well, who's he? How do we know he's any
I sent you
different
the
than-
email.
Well, I know, but I mean, how do we know this guy? How do you know he's any?
Would you like to see his resume?
No, that's.
I mean, it's all.
That's
I mean,
fine. You know, and yeah.
I mean, I didn't go after this just because I want. I mean, I got this letter from Taylor. I'm kind of want to have sour grapes. Garland. And I kind of did one of these. I kind of my eyes went open.
Tom,
Go ahead. This is.
Go ahead, Irv.
Go ahead, Irv. I've expressed my frustration. I think people understand my angle and where I'm coming from.
Well, I think you're confused.
No, not confused. Go
Yeah,
ahead, but go ahead.
you are. Garland is who produces this 30-year warranty. Durf, whatever, this other company, if they had this product, they could have submitted it.
Well, they don't have the product. They make a different product that might do the same performance for a cheaper price.
But they didn't submit it.
Because the Garland product was spec'd. It's like spec'ing out, I want a pickup and I wanted to have 6 diesel engine and I want to have 6 inline cylinders.
The Garland product happened to meet the specs.
You're only going to get a Dodge pickup because everybody else, Ford and Chevys, make V8 diesels. This is how it's done. It's spec'd out. I mean, no one else. And I just, there's lots of people that can make a good roof, and I would have just liked to seen some competition in materials. Just like if we were going to purchase some minivans or school buses, I'd want to see Dodges, Chevys, Fords, or something like that. Not just someone that says it's got to be on a Dodge chassis. And that's what I see. We're getting a really good roof. We're going to have a great roof put on, but it's spec'd out only that product. And judging by a lot of the news articles and long news stories you can read on there, it seems to be that they have a track record of charging too much.
Well,
Charging too
that
much.
might be true, but
I'm uncomfortable.
I think you're not seeing the picture, Tom. Go ahead, Joel.
The spec is a very high-level material specification.
Mm-hmm.
It does not go to the extreme where no one else qualifies. There are other materials out there that meet that spec. So I guess I'm going to disagree with you politely that no one else can sell it. There are other material suppliers out there that can sell a metal that meets the spec. They chose not to.
Can you provide those? Maybe that would
Yeah,
help the conversation.
C-class driven. Makes a metal panel.
Is it more expensive?
I do not know. They've never spec'd it. They've never bid in. So while what we're specifying, what I've specified in this project is very narrow, it is not narrow to the point that no one else qualifies. It is very narrow by design. That is a piece of, explained that in our last meeting. That's a piece of what I consider is why you hired me, why the school district hired me, is to make sure we don't do these roofing projects 3 times during my career. And to ensure that, I need to build a specification that gets us a material that will last that long. If I open up a specification and make it looser and looser and looser, can we save some dollars today? Absolutely. But will we save dollars in the 30-year time period, 40-year time period? It won't happen. And so this is not all about dollars spent today on this contract. My philosophy on building a spec like this and doing this process is, takes that into consideration. There's more expensive roofing systems for sure that we can put on.
Have you?
But it's not the only consideration.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm thinking of my dad and roofs and foundations. Take care of the roof, take care of the foundation.
Yeah.
Your building lasts a long time.
Okay.
Have you looked up their online reputation? Are you comfortable using this company? you
Yes.
know, and you have looked at them.
I will say I'm comfortable using them for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
They are the company that's been around for over 100 years. They've got this roof on buildings all over the country as well as other roofing materials. They do a lot of work for the federal government. That's one of their biggest things. If they were all that bad and all that dirty of a company, the federal government would not be allowing them to do work for them. And also the other thing I will say, and I'm not going to stand here, I'm not a Garland representative and don't know the ins and outs of all their business, but I do know they would love the opportunity to clarify some falsifications that are out there, because anybody can type anything on the internet.
No, and I don't. No, these are 10-minute news stories with undercover cameras and exposés. This isn't some guy with an axe to grind. This is just, here's a new article from this town. Here's one from that town. Here's one from that town. Here's lots of that stuff. And I don't, I just care about
Yeah.
who we do business with, and I really do care, and it's very important to make sure we do everything we can to keep our dollars local. That upsets the heck out of me right there.
With public procurement laws, that becomes a big challenge. I understand the local concept. I buy into it. I'm all for it. And when we do stuff that allows us to, we absolutely shop local. We have a lot of things that we can buy in our current procurement process, short-term, small stuff, things that just require Andy's signature, basically.
Yeah.
That we can absolutely go buy local and make work. And sometimes, or not sometimes, that's what we do. We shop local as much as we can. Public contracting law does not give you an angle to really do that. You are skirting some real bad stuff with saying you have to live within the county or anything else.
No,
The
no.
other piece of it is, the majority of this job, the majority of this project cost is for the labor. It's a prevailing wage project. So all of these companies are local. May not be by your definition of local, but by
Oh, the labor is
ORS of local is Oregon
Yeah.
by state law. They are all Oregon companies. The company that bid it was Oregon. There's one that's owned by a local who lives in
Yeah.
our district.
Like
that
Nor
did the
Personal.
project.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how to get it much more local. One of the problems we run into with commercial buildings in all smaller communities like this is there are not typically companies in a town this size who are set up and capable of doing larger scale commercial projects.
No, when I say local, I just mean in the Northwest.
Yeah.
I mean just local. Our new high school's gym. Our new high school, a lot of the metal I understand on our new high school is Taylor metal. I think that's kind of what got this guy upset, because I've got my steels on the new high school, and now I can't. Now I'm not good enough.
I'm not, well.
According to the letter I got from,
I'm not so
according
certain that it's their metal, but I'm not certain that it's not.
according to a conversation I had, he said that our new gym has his steel on it. For this conversation. So anyway, I obviously I'm upset. We're just going around in circles.
Well, Tom, the last 20 years, I've been a contractor. There has been, for the last 20 years, I can think of electrical products that are exactly this. They spec out a specific supplier, manufacturer, and you can put in for a substitute, but when I put in for a substitute, then they have to tell every other contractor the exact substitute. So there's no advantage for me to do all of that legwork to go right back to ground zero again.
If the substitute is if
Yeah.
you find a cheaper
Yeah.
product than
It's
that
just-
spec, everybody else has the opportunity.
And the
to bid
cities
on it.
have all spec'd this out. They all spec this out, so there's no reason to battle that.
Oh, I understand that the process is incredibly convoluted, and I understand that us considering voting no is a big deal. But I mean, and I'm kind of going back to some of the legal thing. I'm like, why are we even voting on it if the board votes no? It puts us in a legal. I'm kind of baffled by that too.
Well, let me clarify that, Tom. Because
Yeah, please.
If you take no action, then that's like what your attorney is saying is the same thing as saying no. I mean, you have a action in front of you. And if you say no, or if you do nothing, then the contract is done. We've gone through a process where we've spec'd the product, we've done the procurement, we've advertised, we've done mandatory walkthrough meetings, we've done all of the pieces that are there. So if we do nothing at that point, then you're going to have a contractor that's potentially going to say, well, wait a minute, I did everything right, and I'm waiting for you to vote. Your
Yeah.
superintendent has recommended a vote. Your maintenance director has recommended a vote. Your legal counsel has said you're fine, you're legal, you're compliant, you're appropriate, and now you're doing nothing. It's the same risk. It's the same legal risk that you'd have if you voted no.
And that's
There's
what,
go ahead, Tom.
oh, Tom, I know I'm arguing with you, and I understand where you're coming from
Yeah.
about, the local thing and make it fair for everybody and all that kind of stuff, but after we get a couple of letters from our attorneys saying you're putting the district at risk and you could get sued over this, to me it's not worth that on this project. If there's things we need to look at in the future, then fine, but for this project, it's not worth it. To put the district at risk. In my mind,
I just want to
anyway.
reassure folks that we're getting a good value. That's
Yeah.
what I want. That's
No,
what I
right.
want.
Yeah.
I go on the internet and I search all kind of different roofing companies, and I got nothing like the search returns that I got to Garland, and it makes me uncomfortable. And if I was hiring an employee and I got those kind of returns, even though that, wow, this guy's a heck of a performer, but geez, I don't know. That's my feeling for this company. I don't think they're. I'm uncomfortable. So.
Garland
Go
is
ahead, Joe.
one of the largest roofing manufacturers in the nation.
Mhm.
It consequently puts a very large target on them.
Mhm.
Every roofing manufacturer out there has had a failure, guaranteed.
Mhm.
Every roofing manufacturer has had issues somewhere along
Oh,
the line. And, how they back that up and with their financial ability to back it up is huge, piece of it. Can they back up their warranty? That's a big piece of it with all
Oh,
these things. And some of the other companies that are talking to us right now can't back up their warranty financially. So that's a piece of it. Moving, there's two points I guess I'll make, and then I'll shut up unless somebody makes me talk again. And that is, moving forward, if we choose to change how a spec is written, or who we have write a spec, or what we do with that, we can absolutely do that. We can encourage more people to be able to bid easier. The corner that gets us in is we're going to be in a low bid situation. So if our minimum standard
Well,
is here right now, and someone meets that standard with the minimum bid and meets all the requirements, they have the licensing, the insurance, the bonding, all this stuff, we have to take them. Or we're at risk of a lawsuit.
Yeah.
If we lower that standard, someone's gonna meet it at the lowest possible level. So we're gonna have to take that bid. That does something to us.
You get what
These
you pay
people
for.
that have a higher standard material, that have a better material with a better warranty, won't even come to the table, because why would they? If they know that somebody can bid a 15-year roof that has lower material qualities, these guys with the 25, 30-year roofs with much better qualities won't even show up at the table.
Right.
That's one thing. So that's the first point. The second point I have is regarding this particular situation that's going on with this roofing bid, is the longer these kinds of things drag on, this isn't meant to pressure anyone to vote, because obviously that's not going to happen tonight, or to vote either way, but the longer these things drag along, as we are aware, they become much more public out there to the industry, and it will make it much harder to get 7 quotes the next time around.
Yeah, no, I don't, you mentioned that a 15-year roof, someone's gonna supply you with a 15-year. That's why you hire someone to write you a spec that's working for you that says, I want a 30-year roof. And he's got a warranty written out that's written by our guy, not their guy. And that's why, if that's what you want, and they can say, you know what, on this location, the material from this manufacturer, that's what we want to use. Hire that. This guy, you know what, that guy at the local mill in town, he's got good steel. We can spec that. We can mix and match. And that's what I'm obviously, Garland makes great stuff. Even the people complaining on the internet are saying they got great stuff. But there's a lot of stuff that makes it sound like they're, potentially, anyway, I'm uncomfortable with the process.
The warranty will be written by the manufacturer. We can write a warranty, manufacturer won't follow it. They'll tell us in that process what they're willing to warrant and how they're going to
Okay.
warrant it.
Yeah.
And things. So, and I mean, what you described, writing what we want. That's what we did. The only difference is we didn't pay someone $10,000 or $12,000 to write that document.
Right. But would we have saved money in the long run?
Not in this job.
Not if you want the same quality. Quality comes at a price.
That's why I think
Well,
you're
obviously.
missing it, Tom. It's you're
Quality
being-
If you want a 30-year roof, you spec out a 30-year roof.
But
That's what
other
we did.
people they could have bid on it with another 30-year roof, and they did not do that. That's the end of the story.
That's not the information I've gathered, and that's not what so many expose articles online show. And we're going around in circles, everybody. I'm
Yeah,
done.
anybody,
Unless someone else has something to add.
anybody else?
I will add, Mr. Chair, that just as a matter of reference, that the bus facility is a reimbursable expense. 70% of that cost will be reimbursed over depreciated time of that roof. So the school district will get that back. I don't remember how many years that is, 10 years or so. We have to work with our business manager on that. But that 70% of that value, because it's a reimbursable transportation expense from the state of Oregon, will get back in the pocket. So really, we're talking about a 30% expense over time. That we're talking about here for one project within this school district.
Right.
Okay,
Well, I just
just
want-
as a matter of information.
I just wanted to thank Joel. That made a lot more sense this time around.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
Yeah.
To
I
me,
suggest we
too.
make this
The
an action item
expectation.
for a May meeting. Regular meeting.
Yeah,
We'll do that. Great.
okay. Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this one, you guys?
I'm good.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to move into executive session under ORS 192660, exempt public records, superintendent evaluation, and personnel records.